All right. So to start with, there are major industrial pollution and chemical safety risks in the city of Houston, in the Houston area. We have the largest petrochemical complex in the Western Hemisphere, right in our backyards. And on average, every 6 weeks, there's some kind of a chemical fire or catastrophe in the city. I think there was one just a couple of days ago. There was a warehouse fire in southwest Houston. I know there was, when you look at what happened in Beirut recently about the explosion there, it just sort of brings us back to what happened in West Texas a few years ago and the organic pesticide explosion. And then, of course, what happened in Texas City in the 40s. And so Houston is no stranger to chemical disasters. And that is, more than unfortunate, right? It's dangerous to our health, and it shortens life expectancy and causes a whole host of ailments for the residents of the area. I think some of the bigger problems here, as you can see on the right-hand side, is that we have no systematic toxic alert notification system in place. There are a lot of issues regarding the jurisdictions that govern each of these sort of refining bodies and different industries. And because of, I guess, municipal rules and the county not having ordinance making power to restrict some of the operations and safety practices, we're really left to the will of the state and the federal environmental agencies to enforce a lot of what we see as problems. TCEQ, our state environmental agency, only enforces about 2 to 3% of air permit violations. This is a report that came out of the Environmental Defense Fund a couple of years ago. And hopefully Rika will be able to drop a link to that in the chat so you can look it up if you want. But if you've been in the city of Houston for any amount of time, you know that we have a pretty regular industrial pollution issues. Compounding this are the irresponsible development and transportation planning practices of the region. And so the city of Houston and the region doesn't have comprehensive zoning, and it seems like all of the expansion in planning really is automobile and car-based, car-focused. There's very limited public transportation or even safety precautions on many streets to help safeguard cyclists and pedestrians. And Houston, I mean, we're known as a car city. We're an oil town. And so more freeways, more cars, more expansion. That's just been the historical pattern of development in the region. And so this puts a lot of pedestrians, especially children, at risk, if they're trying to walk to school or, just go walk to the park, play in their neighborhoods, right? A lot of times there isn't adequate infrastructure to keep them safe and separate them from the automobiles for physical safety as well as their respiratory health. If you see this last bullet point here at the bottom, 80,000 Houston area children attend schools in TRAP zones, traffic-related air pollution zones. And so this has a direct impact on their health, not only their respiratory health and their physical health, but air pollution can affect your cognitive development as well, and make you kind of not as smart as you would normally be. And then, the next component of this is that there are certain communities that bear a disproportionate burden for these risks, these health and safety risks. Generally, they are communities of color and low income. And, these industrial complexes that are polluting don't really see the effect of it. It's the people who live there and, don't have the resources and means to remove themselves from the situation. So it's really this disequity or this inequity issue about who's causing the problem and then who's feeling the effects of it. And it's basically Houstonians, low income, communities of color, children, vulnerable groups who are being disproportionately affected this unchecked industrial complex, right? So this is sort of the context of where we're at and what we're up against here in the state of Texas and the city of Houston. I included this slide because I think it's important to note that air pollution doesn't just affect your lungs, although it does impact, respiration as far as asthma and other sort of lung cancers and other sort of chronic diseases are concerned. But it can affect your brain and your central nervous system as well. It can give you anxiety. There are some recent reports that have come out that it can induce sort of violent behaviors and definitely contributes to cognitive decline. That children who are raised or grow up in areas with heavy air pollution are at least one grade level behind their peers in cleaner areas. We've also seen some preliminary indication that the death rates from like COVID are greater in areas with historically high air pollution, particularly particulate matter pollution, presumably because of the historic effects that have compromised lung function, and so lead the contractors of COVID to be more vulnerable to worsening effects and outcomes from the disease. So this last point here at the bottom, impacts on the reproductive system. It could also affect children in utero, so that they, if the mother breathes bad air, chronic air pollution exposure while she's pregnant, there could be birth defects or other sort of impairments to the child as well. So to put it lightly, air pollution is a full body experience. And it's something that I feel very passionate about, just because, it is like the literal foundation to life. We breathe more than anything else that we do, more than we drink, more than we sleep or eat. And so it's really I feel like the most important thing. So I'd like to touch on environmental justice for a bit. I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the term, but environmental justice really relates to sort of the disproportionate impacts on certain communities than others, right? So here you can see a map of cancer risk from air pollution in Houston, and you can see it's heavily skewed to the east side of the city where the majority of the industry is located. And so clearly, if you have a lot of petrochemical emissions over there, you're going to have higher cancer risks from air pollution. Here's another map of life expectancy in Houston, and you can see the darker areas are a lower life expectancy, and the lighter the blue areas are a greater life expectancy. So there's a variation of, it says 23 years, but disparity of 23 years between different neighborhoods in the city of Houston, just solely based on where you live. And this isn't entirely due to air pollution. There are a number of other factors like access to healthcare and being located in a food desert and things like that. But this really just goes to show how certain communities, specifically here, the ones on the east side of town, are adversely affected, and it disproportionately so in a number of ways. And it really all of the effects are compounded to affect all aspects of their lives. It's not just their quality of life while they're living, how they breathe, how many times they go to the doctor, whether or not they have to be on chronic medication, but even the length of their life, right? And if they're going to live that extra 20 years or not. And it really just, this is a pretty striking map, I think, for ourselves. So this map comes from EJ Screen. It's a really fantastic resource from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And EJ Screen is a tool that basically determines the environmental justice index for any given, more than county. I think it goes down to the census block, maybe census tract level. But you can see sort of the environmental justice communities in Harris County. And if you want to go to EJ Screen and play around with it, it's pretty good, especially if you like looking at maps, and you can do comparisons to the state or to the rest of the country. And you can add different environmental hazards in there and look at some of these different risks or sources of air pollution and things like that. But you can see again that sort of the same pattern where the east side of the city is more environmental justice, and all of this part here on the west and even up in the suburbs, it's just they're just not environmental justice communities, right? So we can go into a little more discussion about that later, or perhaps in the question portion. But that's sort of the bulk of the issues, right? Sources of air pollution, the health effects, and then sort of the disproportionate impacts on communities of color and low income who are already under-resourced to sort of find solutions and handle these problems. So our solutions at Air Alliance Houston, what do we do about it, right? It's a really big issue, is basically twofold. We've got this theory of change to advance environmental justice. And then we've recently undertaken a strategic strategic planning process. I think it was finalized last summer, where we outlined our 5 strategic priority areas, and then from there have active campaigns to affect positive change in different aspects of air pollution in the city of Houston. So equity, I think all of our work is equity centered. It's at the core of all of the research that we do, all of the community organizing and advocacy work. And I think this is such a great illustration that speaks to the fact like equality is not equity, right? And those who have fewer resources really, we feel, as far as equity is concerned, deserve greater resources to compensate for sort of the unfair distribution that was initially, allocated. So here you can see, the little kid gets 2, right? And so I think what this means is like we're advocating that communities of color and low income really need that extra help to overcome some of these obstacles, because otherwise it's just not equal to say everybody needs the same resources, right? I think that's pretty clear. So this is our 3-pronged approach. Previously, Air Alliance Houston was always said we were research, education, and advocacy. Well, this is still the same thing, but we refined it a little bit more in the most recent strategic plan. And so it's equity-centered research, right? And diffusion of information. That's kind of our fancy way of saying education, but it's like we just want to take the research that we find, spread it to everyone as far and wide as we can. I think there's a lack of access to information in Houston, especially regarding air quality monitoring data. And so it's our job to try to give you the tools and give you access to some of those things that we know how to find and maybe you haven't, and or create new avenues for educational opportunities to spread the word. That's exactly what we're doing here today. And again, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. And especially in this time of COVID and all of these sort of virtual engagement events, we're looking for more opportunities to do this. So I think you'll see at the end of the presentation, I talk about engagement opportunities. And if anybody wants to sort of host a virtual house party or education event or AAH 101 to sort of introduce our work to some of your friends and colleagues and other groups, we'll be happy to do that, because that's one of my primary goals, is to just continue to spread the word about the work that we do and continue to garner engagement. And then finally, advocacy was rebranded and changed to collaborative advocacy, because so much of the work that we do, doesn't happen in a vacuum. We do it with coalition partners. We're members of a number of community groups, CEER, the Coalition for Environment, Equity, and Resilience, HPCC, the Healthy Port Communities Coalition, CEC, the Citizens Environmental Coalition, you name it. There's a home coalition. There's a whole host of coalitions that we're a part of to sort of advance different aspects of the work that we do, because we're greater than the sum of our parts. With the help of our peers, we're able to get further than we would alone. And so we think it's so important to be able to engage community members and community organizations, work together to advance our common goals. So our strategic priority areas that came out of that planning process are these 5: building healthy communities, supporting sustainable and equitable transportation, protecting against chemical disasters, monitoring our air, and mobilizing action. And I just wanted to double check my time, so I'm good. So building healthy communities. Here you see a picture of what I believe is a landfill in the middle of a neighborhood or surrounded by neighborhoods. There are lots of other sort of instances of siding, industrial siding like this. Concrete batch plants are one that have gotten a lot of sort of publicity in recent months or years. We were able to successfully, I guess, put down or dissuade a concrete batch plant from siting in Acres Homes last year, which I think had a lot to do with the fact that the mayor of Houston was from Acres Homes. And so he kind of got personally involved and took it on as a little bit of a project to sort of help with his complete communities. And we were super happy for that process. We went through, if an industry wants to get an air quality permit, right, air pollution permit, they apply to TCEQ, and then that permit notification is sort of sent out that like, hey, somebody applied to have, a facility in your area. You have 60 days or whatever the amount of time is to sort of dispute that or call for a contested case hearing, all of these different things. And so what we've been doing in the last couple of years is to identify those permits as they're being applied for, and then contact the residents within a radius of that location to let them know that this facility may be coming to their neighborhood so that we can begin to organize them, right? And so they can speak out and use their own voices to speak to the TCEQ directly about why this facility shouldn't be located in their neighborhood, where their children play, where they grow their vegetables in the backyard, or whatever it is. There are a number of sort of local sources of air pollution. This one being the landfill, concrete batch plants, metal recycling facilities is another one where they crush and recycle metal. We think recycling metal is a great thing. We want to use our natural resources wisely, but all of the diesel trucks that line up to transport all of the machinery, all of the sort of metal particulate operating around the clock, right, is a major nuisance to the people who live and work in that area. There are a number of other nuisances. I know there was one recently, what is it, Turkey Leg Hut? Have y'all heard of that in Houston? And they're so famous for like having the best turkey legs in the city, if not, the state. I don't know. I've never had one of their turkey legs, but they put off a lot. Their smoker has horrible noxious gas and a lot of this black smoke almost round the clock. And we've gotten complaints from some of their neighbors about sort of the emissions. And because of a lack of zoning and adequate land use regulations in the city of Houston and in the region, Turkey Leg Hut is allowed to operate right next to residents. Same way that concrete batch plants are go in next to schools and things like that. So this is really at the core of our primary strategic priority of building healthy communities and just allowing the residents of the city of Houston to live, work, and play in healthy places that aren't going to compromise their health. We don't think that concrete batch plants or need to go in across the fence because air pollution has no boundaries, right? It's just going to blow right over to you, go into your lungs. If it's small enough, it can cross through your lungs and get into your bloodstream. And there we go with our cancer risks, et cetera. Supporting sustainable and equitable transportation. So here you see a lovely picture of the Katy Freeway, one of the widest in the world, certainly in the United States. And that's just been sort of the answer to growing congestion over the last several decades. It's just widen the roads, add more roads. And, as I say, if you build it, they will come. Expanding roads does not do anything to alleviate traffic congestion. It only allows the problem to grow. And so we believe that transportation funding needs to be allocated to multimodal options like buses and light rail, bicycle lanes, even so much as like building complete streets, right? Anise Parker had her kind of complete streets initiative, and it didn't really go very far, unfortunately. So we're still working with that. I know that the city council and some people, advocacy groups, are still working on expanding complete streets and making sure that, like, if there's especially in the downtown and in highly trafficked areas, in places where you want to live and work and play, that there's adequate space for pedestrians, for people to walk with a stroller or to have a wheelchair, just infrastructure that takes something other than automobiles into consideration. Along with sort of multimodal transportation, we also work on electrification, vehicle electrification. So this would include charging infrastructure for personal vehicles, as well as sort of looking at solutions perhaps on the private sector side for heavy duty electrification. The Port of Houston has a lot of pollution from the industry that operates there, but it also has a lot of pollution from the transportation aspect, right? Ships come in from overseas, they get unloaded, and so there's all of these sort of diesel drayage trucks that sort of take them from the boat onto land, and then there's all of the 18-wheelers that line up waiting for their load, and so they sit there idling for hours and hours at a time waiting, and so there's just diesel exhaust pumping out of all of these vehicles, all of these heavy duty 18-wheelers. Then they get their load and they drive off. And so now we've got another taking that diesel pollution out into the rest of the world. So there are lots of different options or sort of solutions that other port cities have looked at as far as electrifying the port operations so that we don't have those onshore emissions. And then there are other options about cargo transport. Whether it be electric electric heavy duty trucks or cargo freight transport in like a rail system and things like that. So transportation of not only people but goods as well is something that we need to consider from a sustainability standpoint and an equity standpoint. And I could go into that more as well, but to be mindful of our time, I'm moving on. Protecting against chemical disasters is something that is really dear to my heart. I love the city of Houston. I've lived here for 36 years. My daughter is 10 years old, and I'm honestly concerned about her future and her safety. When you've lived here long enough and you've been through all of these chemical fires and hurricanes that have shut down the petrochemical industry, and you see sort of all of the emissions that are released before and after, it's really frightening. And as someone who understands the nature of climate change and the vulnerabilities that we have as a coastal community, I know I'm personally really concerned about a next big hurricane actually coming and hitting all of these petrochemical refineries and us seeing a larger catastrophe than we really ever have before. I know that Hurricane Ike was really bad, but it really wasn't like a hurricane, right? They say it was like, we never got the inland, we never really got the building devastation. Harvey was a tropical rain event, really. It wasn't like, we didn't get the storms of a hurricane. And so we haven't seen basically the worst of it or as bad as it can be. And so there's sort of this looming risk of the chemical industry that may or may not happen with climate change and storms. But there's also this everyday risk of like just operating and having upsets or having permitted releases of emissions into neighborhoods and into communities where they're breathing it in. I know that Baytown, Deer Park, Channelview, Pasadena, all of those on the east side, they're constantly seeing emissions from like Valero and Chevron. And, I don't want to name the whole list. You can do the search yourself and see who kind of the bad actors are. I don't think it's my job right now to point them out. There's a resource called Neighborhood Witness. You can sign up, you can put your zip code in there, and they'll send you an email anytime there's an unauthorized emissions event in your neighborhood. So that's kind of helpful, and you can kind of go through, and they pull it directly from the TCEQ STEERS database. So the problem with that, unfortunately, is that all of these emissions events and the TCEQ database is populated by self-reported industry information. And so it's up to the facility to either give correct information, report it accurately, all of those things. There's not really any oversight in that regard. So it's only as accurate and helpful as the companies are truthful and give accurate information. So hopefully Rika can post a link to Neighborhood Witness. I know it's available from our website as well. We recently relaunched our website. I want to say at the beginning of the year. We spent all year working on it. It's got a ton of great information that really goes into detail about all of the different campaigns that we have, all of the resources available to you to understand what the air quality is in your community when unauthorized emissions are happen, and sort of the legislative process and I guess who you can talk to about it and how do we move it forward so that we can sort of prevent some of these things from happening in the future. The toxic alert system that's listed here at the bottom is something that we and other organizations have been working on for years. It would basically be like an Amber Alert for emissions, right? And based on the geolocation of you and your phone, you would either get a text or not to say, hey, there's an emissions event, or there's whatever release, shelter in place, or whatever. It's something we've been trying to pass at the state legislature because, like I said, about the sort of interjurisdictional issues about the cities and the counties and whatnot. This is something that is best to happen from the top down. I know that the county has been working on something similar, but again, it's something that we will continue to need support from voters, from community members to push it forward. I don't think it's unreasonable. I mean, we've gotten text messages about you have to wear your mask for COVID. Hopefully soon we'll be getting messages about contact tracing and things. And I, for one, would like to know if the air is dangerous outside, if there's been a toxic release of a carcinogen or a neurotoxin, and I should stay inside. Not all cities have sort of sirens outside. So anyway, toxic alert bill and system is something that one of our priorities. Here you can see an image of the regulatory monitors in the city. These are monitors by TCEQ and EPA that measure different things: particulate matter, volatile organic compounds, ozone. Although it looks like maybe it's a lot, we feel like it's not. It's inadequate for the amount of industry that we have. And so we've been working to expand community air monitoring in various neighborhoods around the city. We have purple air monitors, which measure particulate. They're pretty cheap, maybe $300, and you can put one outside of your house or at a school or something. We recently purchased a couple of really more sophisticated air monitors. They're called APIS, A-P-I-S, and they measure like 6 different things, which is multiple VOCs, volatile organic compounds, and ozone, etc. And I think we got 2 of these to put into different communities on the east side, but we're hoping to expand that network as well. And I know that the county has recently expanded its budget in pollution control significantly to include more monitoring equipment and personnel and things like that. So we're working kind of closely with the county, but also with community organizations and partners to expand and supplement the regulatory monitor network that TCEQ and EPA have in place. That's the very basic sort of foundation of what can we do about the problem. First of all, we have to know about the problem and the magnitude of the problem. And if the monitors are inadequate, or they're not always working, or they're down during a hurricane or during an emissions event, then we don't have that data to sort of back up these laws that we want to pass. So this is a really high priority as well. And then finally, mobilizing action. And this is really where we talk about sort of getting everyone involved and teaching communities to advocate for themselves. So this isn't a project of Air Alliance Houston, but a project of Denver Harbor or Magnolia Park or Eastwood or Pasadena, that we can help organize the residents in that community to teach them to become leaders and advocates for their own health and the safety of their children and their families. so that we sort of build the movement to scale, right? And grow this sort of larger body of active participants. So how can you help? Well, go to our website, sign up for our newsletter, join us, follow us on social media. This one down here, share your story, is something new that we're trying this year. Tell us how air pollution has impacted you. You know, ethical storytelling is very effective to sort of communicate the gravity of issues like air pollution, which are almost intangible. But if you can talk about how it's personally affected you or your children or your elderly parents, and how it sort of impairs some of your day-to-day life and function, it can be very cathartic, first of all, for the individual to share that. And second, you know, sharing those stories can help garner the attention of others in the movement, as well as those elected officials and policymakers who have the ability to make substantive change. So there's a forum on our website. You can share your story, be a part of that. Of course, you can donate, right? Give us some money, become a sustainer, monthly donor, major donor, individual, whatever you like. It can be as easy as designating Air Alliance Houston as your charity for Kroger card or Amazon Smile. And then this last one here, host a fundraiser. That's what I was talking about. If you want to help us spread the word and you've got 15 friends that you want to get together, we'd be happy to give a presentation and go into sort of do this overview, or go into some of the issues that really concern you and that are closer to your heart and your interests regarding, you know, your community. So I just wanted to put a little bit these upcoming events out here for you. We've got 2 webinars coming up, and they're both related to transportation initiatives on August 11th and August 19th. And so if you want to go to our website, you can sign up for either of these webinars. Hopefully Rika will be able to guide you to those links. And I think with that, that's all that I have for now. I'm going to drop a poll into the link, and maybe when we come back after the questions, after the Q&A session, just to kind of get some feedback from you. But I think that's all I got. Hopefully I stayed within my time. And yeah.
You're good. Thank you so much, Paige.
Thanks. Mm-hmm.
I'm the environmental planner, so I could let you talk forever.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to go into our breakout discussion groups real quick. In a minute, you'll see it pop up saying join discussion group, whatever number. You can click join or not now if you want to step away, refill your coffee or get a drink of water or something like that. And you can use this time to say hello to other Oasins, or you know, come up with some questions for the Q&A. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, this is a great time to post your questions on Facebook Live, and we'll get them over here into Zoom. And we'll be back in about 5 minutes.